What's up? So in this video, I'm going to talk about my experience with time-restricted eating, and I'm going to talk a little bit about autophagy as well as intermittent fasting. What are all these things? And my thoughts on them, and then a bit about what I've read about it and what the current research might suggest. All right, so for the past few weeks, I've only been eating like 2 meals a day. At most, I'll have maybe 3 meals. But what I've been doing is I'll wake up and I'll have, just water and black coffee, which is essentially a non-caloric drink. Black coffee has maybe like 1 or 2 calories in it, but it's a negligible amount of calories if you don't add anything to it. So I'll wake up and I'll have coffee, and then my first meal of the day will be somewhere between 3 p.m. or 5 p.m. I'll eat really like dinner as my first meal of the day, and then I'll wait at least 3 or 4 hours. So then at somewhere between 6 p.m. to 10 p.m., depending when I had my first meal. So about 3 or 4 hours later, I'll have my second meal, and that'll be, I'll really eat whatever. Sometimes I'll eat French toast or pancakes or just eggs with rice and various different fruits. I'll generally try to have some type of slower digesting protein as well in that meal if I can. So, have I noticed any changes? I haven't noticed a ton of changes. Maybe the digestion is easier. Like, I feel like when I go to eat, I'm actually really hungry, so I'm desiring more to eat. Whereas back when I was eating more like the 4 to 6 meals a day eating paradigm style, I would not really be hungry every time I went to eat, but I would more just be kind of forcing myself to eat because I was like, okay, it's time to eat. You're gonna eat because you gotta hit that meal frequency, and these are your goals. Whereas when I'm eating the twice a day style, I'm actually very hungry when I go to eat, my first meal especially. So my desire to eat is stronger, and I don't really feel like I'm forcing myself to eat. I can also eat a larger amount in that meal. So yeah, take that for what you will. That's my experience with time restricted eating. Now let's talk about autophagy, and I'm going to define it here and talk a little bit about how it's measured and what we know about it and what we don't know about it. So autophagy, defined, is the consumption of the body's own tissue as a metabolic process occurring in starvation in certain diseases. Also, the destruction of damaged or redundant cellular components occurring in vacuoles within the cell. So, if you've studied biology, I'm sure you've heard of apoptosis. Apoptosis is the process where the lysosomes of the cell release enzymes to break down an entire cell. Autophagy is essentially where I think the lysosome releases a selective amount of these enzymes and breaks down certain components of the cell, thereby not destroying the entire cell, but recycling some portion of the cell to be reused in other cells. So basically, you're breaking down part of a cell and recycling some of the cell's organelles. The organelles, represent the pieces that constitute an entire cell. So you're essentially recycling certain portions of the cell when cells undergo autophagy. There's much better explanations with diagrams of autophagy online that explain this better than I can off the top of my head. But that's a brief summary of what it is. So how is autophagy measured? So far, it's thought to only be able to be measured through taking biopsies of muscle cells and then viewing them under high-powered microscopes or electron microscopes. So biopsying muscle tissues and then viewing the muscle tissue to view autophagosomes. There's some research on this. It's still emerging research. Autophagy, as is also apoptosis, these are constantly ongoing processes in our body, but what we're trying to figure out is how we can increase the rate of it. So it's kind of always an ongoing process. It's thought that time restricted feeding or fasting potentially increases the rate of autophagy, as does exercise through some different pathways, but it's uncertain what duration of time restricted feeding or fasting is needed to actually have an effect on autophagy. In some smaller mammal trials, usually in rodent trials, it's thought that even just fasting for a day can significantly increase autophagy in mice. But the problem there is that 3 days of fasting for a mouse can cause it to lose a very high percentage of its body weight or even die. Whereas with humans, you're not going to lose a ton of body weight, and most of the body weight you would lose is more just loss of material from the GI tract. Essentially, any amount of fasting that would be needed to incur significant amounts of autophagy in a small rodent or small mammal in a mouse trial, you're probably going to have to scale that up in human trials. And then we have to look at the practicality of it. If I go so personally everybody has a different hunger tolerance. If I go like 12 to 20 hours without eating, I'll probably feel like I'm starving by the end of that. A lot of people can go longer. Some people can go several days without eating. But what I'm getting at here is that any amount of time frame that it would take for a mouse to incur significantly increased rates of autophagy, it would take a human probably significantly more. And we don't really know what time frame this is. And given the current preliminary information, it's unlikely that time-restricted feeding, where your longest non-eating interval is in the range of 10 to 16 hours, is going to incur significantly increased rates of autophagy. We really don't know, and it's not really very practical to undergo muscle cell biopsies. A lot of people don't really want to be subject to muscle biopsies unless you're being paid a lot of money to participate in the study. So it's just there's a lot of pitfalls there. So in short, autophagy is somewhat measurable, but it's not practical, and we don't really know what time frame a human would have to restrict their eating for in order to incur significantly increased rates of autophagy. So moving on, let's talk about just the time-restricted feeding, intermittent fasting in relation to weight loss. If you hold calories constant, so your calorie intake is the same regardless of feeding intervals. So obviously, if you're going to eat only once or twice a day, you'd have to eat one or two really big meals to equal the same number of calories as somebody who is eating 3 to 5 smaller meals. There's not really a significant change in weight lost or weight gained. I think that your calories taken in is still going to be the biggest predictor of weight loss or weight gain. With that being said, individuals that eat less meals, on average, they're going to consume less calories. That's not always true. If you're starving when you hit those one or two meals, maybe you're just going to go ham, and consume a ton of calories. Maybe you're even eating more calories than you would have if you're eating the 3 to 5 meals a day, because maybe you're consuming more energy dense foods. Who knows? So hopefully this was a bit of useful information as to what is autophagy, my personal experience with time restricted feeding, and also its implications in relation to weight loss. I think calories consumed is still going to be the main, most important factor in relation to weight loss, although eating less meals, if you can curb your appetite, maybe you will end up consuming less calories with that organizational style of eating. So hopefully this information was useful to you. I'm going to make more videos on this in the future with greater detail as I collect more information. As always, drop your questions in the comments below. Make sure you leave a like, share this if you found it useful, and message me more of your questions, and I'll answer them in my next question and answer video. Thank you for watching, and have a good day.